Thank you, Paranita, and thank you for inviting me. It's very good to be here. I'm not often here on Tuesday evenings. And yes, I'm talking about the point of freedom. So anyone who thought I might be talking about field of fear and do it anyway, that's a slight misunderstanding, miscommunication. But it does, it does relate in a way. So the theme for this particular session, the theme that we're following, is this very strong verse from the Dhammapada. Mindfulness is the way to the deathless, unmindfulness the way to death. Those who are mindful do not die, whereas the unmindful are like the dead. There's another translation of the Dhammapada which I really like. It's not very accurate, but I thought I'd just read you the translation from that particular translation, because different translations give us different sort of ways in. Wakefulness is the way to life. The fool sleeps as if he were already dead. But the master is awake and he lives forever. But wakefulness is the way to life. Awareness, mindfulness is the way to life. So this is a very, very strong statement from the Buddha that being unmindful, being unaware, is like being dead or asleep. However, it's mindfulness, it's awareness that is our path to freedom. It's the way to life. It's our mindfulness that can help us develop a satisfying, creative life, and ultimately to walk in the footsteps of the Buddha.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt.
Can't you hear?
We can't quite hear clearly. I don't know if the microphone needs to go a bit lower to catch the sound.
Lower down here on the first. Lower here.
How's that? Is that better?
I think that's slightly better, yeah.
Not a lot, though. Is that better?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Speaking more into the microphone.
Well, if anything, if you stop being able to hear me, stand up, wave, do something. So yes, this evening we're going to be looking at a crucial point in our experience, the gap between feeling and craving, and see how our awareness of that point can help us move from a reactive mind to a creative mind. We can move from a mind dominated by craving to one that is bright, expansive, wise, kind. This point in our experience, this gap between feeling and craving, and I'll come on to that in a minute, is sometimes referred to as the point of freedom, because it's where we start to move towards freedom. It's also referred to as the battleground of the spiritual life, because it's not always easy to become aware of how we're feeling, and then to make a skillful choice. In fact, strangely enough, quite a lot of people, when they first become Buddhists, find that they're much angrier or much more irritable or much more at the sway of their desires than they ever realized. And that's because we're developing awareness, actually. It's a very positive step when that starts to happen, but it can be really uncomfortable, and it can sometimes come as a real shock if you've tended to, say, suppress your anger. To suddenly find that you have quite a lot of angry feelings can come as quite a shock, and it doesn't fit with how you're trying to practice as a Buddhist. So yes, but that's just that because we're becoming more aware. So yeah, this is, we always need to remember on the Buddhist path that we're training, we're developing a skill. So we're going to get it wrong most of the time, as we do with any skill. You just have to think back to when you learnt a new skill, like, I don't know, learning to drive or something. It's all takes a while, doesn't it? And it's quite clunky, and we get it wrong, and we grate the gears and all that sort of thing, or we stall. So it's the same. We're training our minds, and it's a skill that we need to develop over time. We need to bring those three aspects of mindfulness to mind that we heard about last week from Paranita, in order to be able to sort of focus on the task. So just to remind you, those three aspects of mindfulness are sati, which means recollection, remembering, just remembering really. Appramada, which is our ethical vigilance, noticing what we're doing, what choices we're making, and sampajana, which is having a clear comprehension of our purpose. So if you didn't hear it, Paranita gave a really, really clear description and of these three different aspects of mindfulness. So do go back and listen to that. But yeah, we need those three aspects to bring to bear on this point. Yes, so for most of us, most of the time, we believe that the solution to life's problems consists in having more of what gives us pleasure and less of what gives us pain. And we're restlessly seeking for what will make us happy. Some years ago, I had a very forceful example of this. I was on the tombola stall at my son's primary school. And tombola, you know, is where you have a whole load of objects on display and they've all got numbers, raffle tickets, and you come and buy a ticket, and if you get the right ticket, you get the object. Anyway, this little lad, he was about 9, he was obsessed with getting this, I don't know, it was a sort of Action Man figure, or whatever it was. Anyway, he was obsessed, and he kept coming back to the store and kept buying another ticket and kept being disappointed. And he went on and on like this. It was really quite painful to watch. And I think he spent all the money that he had at this school fair on the tombola stall trying to win this figure. And of course, sadly, disappointingly, he didn't get it. And he was very disappointed, very frustrated, upset, unhappy. He was in the grip of craving, and he was left suffering. And we might like to think that we're different to him, but actually we're the same. We're searching for the perfect house, the perfect relationship, the wonderful job, the best car, the perfect healthy body, and so on and so on. And you're all familiar with this story, but it goes, you know, if only I was attractive enough, clever enough, exercised more, had more money, etc., then, you know, my life would be wonderful and I would be really happy and really satisfied. So we fall under the spell of craving, and it's a form of madness. I mean, I think most of us probably have actually been in the grip of craving, and it's like you suddenly come out of it and it's like the scales fall from your eyes and you wonder, what on earth was I doing, obsessing about needing that coat or wanting to buy that car or whatever it is. You know, it's like, it's a sort of form of madness that we just fall under its spell time and again. So we're caught in this relentless cycle, ricocheting between pleasure and pain, which is doomed to failure because ultimately the objects that we desire will disappoint us. They might satisfy us for a bit. That new car might be wonderful for a bit, but it's going to break down and it's going to, ultimately, it's going to stop working. Same, sadly, with people, that ultimately everything is impermanent. And what we're doing is we're just making a fundamental mistake in our understanding of the world. We're over-investing in those objects. There's nothing wrong with them, nothing wrong with relationships, nothing wrong with a car or a house that's pleasurable and pleasant and so on, so on. Nothing wrong with all of that, but we invest those things with characteristics that they don't have, so that they're permanent and will give us lasting satisfaction. Whereas the Buddha showed us that life in conditioned existence is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and insubstantial. So everything in conditioned existence is impermanent. A couple of weeks ago, Punyamala, when he was giving his talk, he gave a very tangible example of this search for happiness and fulfillment when he energetically drew us sort of cycling round and round on the wheel on the flip chart, which you may remember if you were here. So you might all be thinking, well, so what's the point? Why don't we all just give up, go home, go under the duvet? But all is not lost, because the Buddha, in his genius, has pointed out to us the way to overcome suffering and stop this relentless cycling round and round. He's shown us that we can have a truly satisfying life, and we can break the reactive cycle of habits fueled by craving. And we can start to gain a taste of this way to freedom by attending to our experience with mindful awareness. Mindfulness is the way to freedom. It's the way to the awakened state of mind, to enlightenment. And we can bring a mindful awareness to our feelings and so move or begin to move from a reactive to a creative mode of being. This awareness then creates a gap between feeling and craving. So, this is, for those of you who know, this is a point on the wheel of life. It's the outer rim of the wheel of life. And it's called the gap. So here we have feeling, and here we have craving. And feeling, I'm talking about feeling here in terms of sensation, pleasant, painful, and neutral sensation, not in terms of emotions. It's the word in Buddhism is Vedana. So I'm talking about just pleasant or painful stimuli. And then craving is our desire, thirst. It's us grasping onto things which we think are going to make us happy. And this feeling is passive. It's just part of our experience of through our senses. So it's passive. Whereas craving is active. It's actually something we're grasping on, we're clutching on. We really want that thing, or we want that experience, or we don't want something. That's, the other things we don't want something. So yeah, the feeling is our stimulus, and craving is the reaction. So that's the gap. And yes, so Vedana is pleasant or unpleasant, and it can be in response to An external stimulus like the sun. So if the sun is warm, sun is pleasant for most of us. This very cold, damp weather that we've just been having, certainly today, yesterday, for me anyway, gives rise to unpleasant Vedana. And it's possible, but we also have, we feel Vedana in response to what's going on in our minds, so to thoughts and our imagination as well. It's not just on the physical senses. And it's possible. So there's nothing the matter with these feelings. They're just, as I say, they're just a passive stimulus. This is just a stimulus. So it's really important that we don't judge ourselves. So, if I'm feeling unpleasant Vedana because it's really horrible and cold and damp, there's nothing the matter with that. So because if we judge ourselves, then we're just adding a whole other sort of stimulus. Well, in a way, we've kind of going into craving. So it's possible to observe these feelings without reacting to them. And I just want to read you what Sangha says in relation to this point in our experience. The transition from sensation to craving, from passive feeling to active desire, is the psychological fact standing behind all myths of the fall of man, from paradise to earth, from a blissful to a miserable state and sphere of existence. The interval between these two nidanas is the battlefield of the spiritual life. And to experience feelings, yet check desires, is that victory over oneself, which the Buddha declared to be greater than the conquest of 1,000 people 1,000 times. So this is a crucial sort of point in our experience. And by practicing awareness and bringing attention to feelings and sensations means we're less at the mercy of these compulsive habits that we have. We can gain some spaciousness, and so we have room to maneuver and make a choice. So this point here, when we bring awareness to it, we have a choice. And the choice is that, we can either sort of react with craving and continue to go around the wheel, or we can move off it and move towards a creative, more satisfying life. So the important thing is that awareness gives us this choice here. So to give you an example of this, I was on retreat at one of our women's retreat centres called Tiratnaloka, which has a reservoir just nearby it, very beautiful. It's in Wales. And it was a study retreat on conditionality. And one morning I thought, after breakfast, I've just got time to walk up to the reservoir. So I walked up to the reservoir, and it was just stunningly beautiful. It was so gorgeous. I was just sort of blown away by the beauty of this scene. And it was very, very still and peaceful. And I started to think, got to get back to a study session. Don't want to go to the study session. I just want to stay here and enjoy this beauty. And I was getting more and more sort of caught up in my own little drama and resistant to kind of going back to the study session. So I was already sort of distanced from what was happening anyway. And then what happens is there was a bit of a breeze and it started to rain. And at that point, I just thought, I almost had to laugh. In fact, we were laughing over dinner about some unpleasant Vedic. Well, humour actually is one way to work with it, actually. Anyway, I just had to say, okay, there you go. You know, things change. You can't, this scene is not going to go on forever. It's not going to satisfy me forever. And there's no point sort of getting cross about having to go to study and all of that. It was just a sort of whole waste of time and effort. But I think because I was studying conditionality and I was on retreat, I could kind of see much more clearly than I usually can what my mind was doing. And yeah, it's been, it was a real lesson in just being with what is happening rather than adding anything into it. So that was one experience. There's a famous story about someone called Bahir of the bark garment, where the Buddha gives Bahir a teaching which relates to my experience. Then Bahir, thus must you train yourself. In the seen, there will be just the seen. In the heard, just the heard. In the imagined, just the imagined. In the cognized, just the cognized. Thus you will have no thereby. So what the Buddha is saying is, he's saying, if you see something, just see it. Don't read anything else into the experience. Just see what is there with no overlay of prapancha. And the same is true with the other senses. Just hear, just smell, just touch, just imagine, and just think. It's, you know, I think this whole teaching and the gap is, in a ways, it becomes very interesting when we apply it to our thoughts. It's harder to sort of see sometimes. But don't wander off and get distracted. Just think about whatever it is and sort of leave it at that. Give up the mental commentary. And then the thereby of the ego-bound interpreting. So yes, the thereby is the thereby is the prapancha, really. It's when the ego starts to comment and get its have its say, really, and prapancha develops. So yes, the Buddha is saying, just train ourselves to see just what is there. And this is very easy to say and hard to practice, why we need all those aspects of mindfulness to be recollected, clear in our purpose and keeping an eye on what's going on. And Pranita also brought in White Tara's all-pervading awareness with her 7 eyes. In a way, we need those 7 eyes to kind of stay awake and see what's going on. So when there's no craving and we're fully attending to our present experience, then we experience contentment. Life is fulfilling, and there's a lightness and joy in our experience. We're at one with the flow of conditions, and maybe we glimpse the mirror-like wisdom of Akshobhya. Akshobhya's on the shrine. Have a look at him later. He's the deep blue Buddha of the 5 Buddha mandala. His name means unshakable or the imperturbable, and he's the Buddha of truth. And he's associated with, or he symbolizes, the mirror-like wisdom that appreciates phenomena just as they are, without adding anything at all. It's like a reflection in a mirror. So he just sees all phenomena as they are. So, we can also bring Akshobhya to mind when we're exploring this area and help him, call on him, and also just having him in mind will help us develop awareness. If you relate to him, that is. It doesn't work for everybody. I just wanted to share a verse from Sangha with you from a poem called Water from Thawed Out Snow, which I think relates to this area, and I find it helpful. So the poem is about the movement of water flowing from up in the mountains in the snow to the sea. So it's about a stream, really. And this second verse goes, "It loitered not among the sedges, nor hung in rainbows over ledges. It kissed the pebbles as it went, and yet to go it was content." I find those two lines, it kissed the pebbles as it went, so it's fully involved with whatever, we're doing, and yet we're content to let it go. It's a real sort of art, and I think that poem kind of captures that, for me anyway. So let's just think a bit about how we might become mindful of our feelings, how we might become more mindful of our Vedana. So firstly, we've got to believe it's possible to change, or at least we've got to be willing to make an experiment. Can we change our mind? The first two verses of the Dhammapada say experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. So here the Buddha is clearly saying that how we experience life depends on our state of mind. So we need to really take this on. And we can, to help us, we can also reflect on experiences we've had when our craving is weaker. For example, if you've been on retreat, you might have noticed that your craving is weaker, or it's just not as present. Or we can be fully absorbed in something. It could be something artistic, or it could be listening to music, or painting, or it could be something practical, sport, or cooking or something. When we're just really fully absorbed, then we might not be craving. And we've all had an experience of moments when we're free from craving, and that is when we see a rainbow. So when we see a rainbow, we just feel delighted, and I feel very sort of uplifted and excited, and it's just a really sort of positive thing. I don't want it to carry on. Actually, to think of craving a rainbow to me feels sort of almost sacrilegious, but it's like we're just always just delighted when we see a rainbow, and it's a sort of experience that is complete, I think, for most of us in itself. So we've all had, there may be other things I'm sure you can think of other things, but for me that is a moment. So when there is no craving present, so we all know what it's like not to crave. That's the point, and that's we can move from that. So we need to be willing to make the experiment and see if there are more moments when we don't feel craving, or it's not nearly as obvious. And secondly, we need to recognize that there is this gap in our experience between stimulus and response. Our experience is richer and more multifaceted than we tend to acknowledge. Any moment that we're in contains pleasant and unpleasant Vedana, and we can just, we might be homed in on the fact that, I'm really uncomfortable, and my knees really hurting, or just got that backache, or whatever it is. But actually we can pull back the camera lens to a wide angle and see, well, yes, that might be there, but also maybe my hands are warm, or maybe I'm enjoying the yellow of the walls, whatever it is. So we all, at any moment, our experience, the richness of our experience contains both pleasant and unpleasant Vedana. But we tend to either focus in on unpleasant Vedana or pleasant Vedana, and we ignore the sort of bigger picture. So we recognize there is a gap, and that there's more to our experience than we might think. I had a very, a strong experience of this a few years ago. Some of you will know Gaurava, who is an artist in our Sangha here, and he paints very, very beautiful paintings. And during the pandemic, he decided to paint the process of decay. So he painted very beautiful paintings of fruit and bread and vegetables in various stages of decay, which I found it very interesting, because I realized that my appreciation, sort of stopped. It's almost like there was a sort of wall came down. It's like, so, that was fine to paint a sort of tulip. It was fine to paint tulips, but to paint tulips that were really decayed and not very pleasant looking and had flies on them and stuff, I just thought that my initial response was aversion. But the painting itself remained very beautiful, and actually the overall effect of seeing his work was to broaden my understanding of the process of decay, and also to see the beauty in it, because there's nothing wrong with the process of decay. It's just a natural process which has a lot of beauty and some very, very interesting colours in mould and so on. It's just that I had a very strong aversion to it, which he challenged. So there's more to our experience than we recognize. And with mindfulness, we can open into a rich, broad experience and open up to both the pain and the pleasure. And over time, we can develop a broad, stable awareness, like a deep, clear lake. And we can stay stable and steady with the ups and downs of life, a bit like Akshobhya in his sort of unshakable imperturbability and his mirror-like wisdom. So in the gap, we have a choice. We then have a choice about how we respond to our experience. So rather than just reacting, how we choose is going to make a difference to us and to others. I'm just aware of time. I'll just quickly give you one example. While I was preparing for this talk, I had to change insurance companies and renew some insurance. And it was my first experience of an AI conversation. So I'm also a bit of a Luddite. And, in my ideal world, I would be able to pick up the phone and talk to a human being who knew all about everything. Anyway, I didn't seem to be able to make myself understood to this voice. it didn't even seem to understand me saying no. And it was a very frustrating experience. And I was just going round and round in this loop. And I thought, well, how do I get out of this? How do I get it to send me to a person? I also wasn't clear, it sort of seemed to be implying that I'd renewed my insurance, but as far as I knew, I hadn't paid anything. So I was confused. Anyway, at some point, I was connected to somebody who, unfortunately, had trouble understanding and who was a bit like a robot herself. But anyway, she was very pleasant, and I did renew my insurance. So there was a lot of unpleasant Vedana there, which I did, I was irritated and frustrated. But I did manage to pull back and think, okay, well, I have renewed my insurance. It hasn't taken that long. It's a very nice day. The weather was very nice. It was a very nice sunny day. It's a very nice sunny day. And I didn't go into righteous indignation, which I could quite well have done. So I didn't then go and get full of indignation to my partner and sort of it's up to him whether he gets affected or not. Anyway, I didn't sort of splurge it out around the house. So what I'm saying is, what am I saying? Well, it makes a difference. We have choices. We have choices that we can make. We catch ourselves, and we can then have a choice about what we do. And even if we've gone a certain, we will inevitably be going some way down round the wheel or down this road of being in, to some extent, in the conditioned by our craving, either in terms of aversion or attraction. But we don't have to go the whole way. And in a way, that's what happened with this phone conversation. So we can start to notice and be mindful of our Vedana in any situation. And you could resolve to notice in the coming weeks, what is the Vedana in your experience, and then zoom out and hold it in that bigger container and make a creative choice. Just as we were meeting earlier this evening, Satch Jyoti made a very interesting, or told us a very interesting fact, that if you're experiencing something positively, you need to experience it for 14 seconds for it to really register in your brain. And I believe that, actually. So, you could just, after tonight, every time you notice something really positive, you could just dwell with it for 14 seconds as a practice for the next couple of weeks. But anyway, this is just a sort of, framework, if you like, the one I've just been talking about what we can do, how we can make a choice, how we can choose mindfully. We make the experiment, be willing to make the experiment, recognise the gap between stimulus and reaction, and experience that bigger perspective, and then make that wise choice in line with your values. So, and the more we can do that, then the more we will start to have a sense of freedom in our lives and of mastery. And that feeling can grow to the point where it can be strong enough where we would feel free even if we were physically imprisoned. And I'm just going to read you one sentence from the mountaineer W.H. Murray, who spent 3 years in a prisoner of war camp in the Second World War. And he writes very, very interestingly about that experience. But this one sentence, during this last year, I had not one thought of myself, patterns that he knew so well, and he did not feel like he was physically imprisoned, which he was and had been for 3 years. There's more he said, but I haven't got time. So that's just a very powerful testament, I think, to the fact we don't have to be at the mercy of our craving. We can follow the path to freedom. We can be awake to the gap of awareness between stimulus and reaction. As the woman on the tube says, mind the gap or watch the gap. Be alive to the present moment and its richness. We're no longer trying to make everything okay. It's rather that we are okay with how things are and at peace. So we're no longer trying to make everything okay to fit with our view of the world, but we are being okay with the way things are, with how things are in our life, and we're at peace. We're no longer going against the flow of conditions or trying to dam that flow, but we're flowing with the contents. So just to finish, sorry, I've gone on a bit, is another verse, a slightly later verse in the section on mindfulness from the Dhammapada. So awake, reflect, watch, work with care and attention, live in the way, and the light will grow in you. Thank you.